just love pointing out that this is, you know, this is typical native grapevine. This one's probably been here 100 years, yeah. The amazing thing about these grapevines is this, notice the difference between this vine, okay, it's huge, it's almost the size of a tree, and these vines, they have little hairs that can cling to a tree. So this vine can actually grow up the tree. It might be, we have no idea how old that is. This one, however, it literally had to grow up with the tree. So it is as old as the tree it's attached to. And I was actually listening to my dear boss, Tina, the other day, explaining the fact that sometimes those trees will actually then fall down, and this grapevine will then loop onto the next tree. And that's why you get these amazing configurations of arcs and loops and circles. So as we walk in the forest, you'll start to see them, and you'll, you know, most people think, oh, it's just messy and we should get rid of that. And it's actually this fabulous native vine that produces little grapes. It produces food for animals, for wildlife. So just the first amazing feature in the forest. Probably the most amazing thing about this is, as Tina mentioned, you've just entered an old growth forest, and it looks very different from, say, if you were at you know, a typical forest at, say, Shelby Farms. There is a patch of older forest there, but this is as mature a forest as you're going to get for even a lowland to upland forest in this area. And what does that mean? Like, what kind of features does that have? I mean, when you first walk in, doesn't it just feel wild? And you think to yourself, why does it feel wild to me? Why does it feel wild? Well, if this had been logged, it might have a very specific time period that all of the trees shut up. So this has a lot of variability. Like, the trees are different ages. We have young trees and old trees. We have understory, we have mid-story, we have overstory. And it's that complexity that is the charm of a mature forest. And that complexity also brings in a whole suite of wildlife that you wouldn't see in your backyard. So there are birds that require the structure, and there are small mammals that require the structure. There are reptiles, and that's really what makes it so amazing. This is the beginning of our Old Forest Loop. We do have a marked trail that people can take, and we have a map online that you can take. You know, you can find the numbers, you won't get lost, it's not that big, but it'll take you and give you some information at each stop. There's so many things we could point out just right here. This would be one of our signature huge trees that's fallen recently, and you think, oh, that's so terrible, this tree, this big, magnificent tree has fallen. And actually, we just see it as a celebration of the continuing of life in this park. This is going to be the soil that is the nursery for the next large tree that grows up. And so we, as the state natural area, it's the Old Forest State Natural Area, it's designated as a conservation area, and it is our duty not to remove a tree like this. We certainly get it out of the pathway if needed, but this is, you know, a part of the ecosystem. And so the ecosystem starts from the very bottom all the way to the top. There's so many things we could point out. I mean, this is jewelweed, a native flower that's going to be flowering all summer. It's got this beautiful little flower. Hummingbirds love it, bees, butterflies. It likes a sunny spot, and when you have a tree fall, you have more sun. And so we've had this beautiful patch of jewelweed come up right here. So we're going to walk in on the trail and just enjoy yourself. Do you want to be the lead on the trail?
Sure, yeah.
Filming? You can't miss it.
Okay, cool.
If anyone is concerned about things like poison ivy, just avoid touching any green on the sides. There is poison ivy, but you really would have to work hard to get it. So we're going to stay on the trail. quite historic. I'm old, and I'm a Memphian, and I have been walking these trails literally since the 80s even. So, and the amazing thing is this particular trail is utterly historic. It's always been here. It's been here since I've been walking in it for decades. So that's what's so amazing, is that I can literally think about what the forest looked like even 30 years ago and think about the changes, because of course nothing is static. Even though this is an old growth forest, nothing is static. We've had areas where we've removed invasives, and so new plants have come in. We have one area that there was a small tornado that touched down, and again you think, oh no, you know, we've lost an acre of the old forest, and all of this amazing vegetation is coming back in. And we now have a wonderful experimental area to manage and say, how can we encourage the native plants to come in and perhaps discourage some of the non-natives that tend to take over the sunny spots? So it's like just a laboratory, and it's wonderful because Melissa, who is an insect expert, bird expert, everything. My forte is birds, and she's kind of got it all when it comes to being a naturalist. That area, we see a whole new suite of birds. So this year we might have, I'll name a bird, Indigo Bunting really likes little sunny spots, you know, and that's something that we might see in that sunny spot that 2 years ago we didn't see it there. So it's an amazing spider web right here. So Melissa and I are both hearing a lot of little birds call, and both of us, we know what those are, and it's wonderful to think about. Bird watching is really hard in a tall forest like this. I mean, it's so tall. You don't always get the opportunity to see the bird, but if you know their calls and their songs, you can know what it is. So we have something over here to the right that's just making a little punctuated song. It's like 3 short syllables. There it goes. That's the Acadian Fly Catcher. So this is a bird that you are not going to have it in your yard in Central Gardens. As much as you have wonderful, you know, plants and plantings and everything, you can't plant habitat for an Acadian Fly Catcher. So he's here because the old forest is quality forest enough for him to be here. And the fact that he's here right now means that he's breeding here. So that's really exciting to know that we have a breeding Acadian Fly Catchers in the old forest. It's like a bioindicator of the magnificence of this forest.
Is this bird breeding time season?
It is bird breeding time. That's a great point. When Melissa and I were doing all of our nerdy naturalist stuff even 3 weeks ago, this forest was cacophony of noise, okay? So many birds singing, and that's because it was migration. We are a hot spot. If you think about, is anybody a birder? Yeah?
Novice.
Yeah, awesome. Okay, my favorite. It's so great when you can make a Carolina Reed entertaining. It's my favorite thing in the world to do, is like some basic, you know. What are it is. They're so adorable. Well, we have what is similar to, if you think of the eastern seaboard, that's one migratory route. The Mississippi River is another migratory route. And so this forest is this emerald, just postage stamp of, oh my gosh, I gotta get there. You know, it's this wonderful hotspot. It's one of the reasons why it's so important to conserve it for the migratory route. And compare it to Central Park in New York City, which is a huge hotspot. It attracts birders from around the world. The Mississippi River used to be just this river of habitat. You know, I mean, it was like all along it was intact riparian, and all we have left is these little patches. You know, I mean, the Mississippi River is also the ultimate floodplain, which we've now turned all into agriculture. You know, we had the ivory-billed woodpecker that was all throughout here in these amazing towering trees, and it's gone. So what we have, we really need to preserve, and we have such an opportunity here in the city to do that. I just wanted to walk up to this wonderful plant. This is Spicebush, and I mean, you know, if anybody's willing and they want to smell it, if you pinch the leaf and then smell your fingers, or even take a leaf, it's got this amazing smell to it. I love to ask people what they think it smells like. You can see the little berries. We had beautiful little yellow flowers earlier in the season. You got to pinch it pretty hard. Don't worry about it. We're not gonna hurt it.
Kind of citrusy.
Oh, wow.
Isn't that amazing?
I like.
I love that. I love it. And you can take a leaf off if
It's
you want.
almost like citronella.
Yes.
What's the name again?
It's called Spicebush, and it's one of the first things that flowers in the spring. It's these beautiful tiny little yellow flowers, and we all go, "Oh my gosh, we're gonna make it through the winter." When we finally see the little yellow flowers here. So I always think of it as like Fruit Loops meets Pine Sol.
Yeah.
Isn't that funny? You smell the Fruit Loops? Yeah, right.
The one that doesn't smell good that Eric always punks people with.
Tree of Heaven, yes.
Everyone smells like rancid peanut butter.
It does.
It's a
Yeah.
plant, so it's okay to be like,
Yeah.
gross.
And when our operations director gives this tour, he makes you smell that, and it's kind of like a punk. It's a joke. So it feels it's way too nice to do that.
Oh. You know, and you might actually, you'll start to notice, I don't know if anybody, does anybody like to landscape their yards? Does anybody?
Oldwood.
So this is like this is a wild hydrangea.
Yeah.
So like the hydrangeas that we have in our yard are you know, or originate from plants like this. This is the wild version. It'll be white flowers, of course. We don't have pink flowers or anything. But anyway, it's just nice to think like, oh, all those plants I love so much in my yard probably have a natural origin, and that's why hydrangeas do so well in Memphis, is because there it is, doing its own wild thing right here. So. Yeah, it's the only, they are forest lovers, dense forest lovers, interior forest lovers. I do have them actually even in my neighborhood. I mean, that's one of the things, birds are so funny, all animals are so funny, but you know, what the parula needs is mature trees. Some other birds need mature trees, understory, and all of the complexity as well. So I would have a northern parula. I live in Raleigh. I've got a lot of amazing trees in Raleigh. And so I would have a northern parula that, you know, breeds there. But it's one of the only warblers that breeds in the old forest. There is a limit because we are so small. So I'm actually doing a bird study right now, and it incorporates 4 parks in the city. They all have mature, similar forest, but 2 of them have forest nearby. I can call them the contiguous plots. And then 2 of them are these little postage stamps. This one, and then Nesbitt Park in Bartlett. So I'm looking at the differences. Does it make a difference if it has surrounding habitat, that mature patch? I'm finding that it does. One of the differences is, and of course my parula hasn't sung again, it's in the warbler group, which is a gourmet, picky group of birds. Parulas like it here fine, but the other suite of warblers, it's about 8 species, I'm only finding them in the ones with contiguous forests. So, you know, there's a limit to how much 126 acres can support.
parkways, how that initiative happened a few years ago where they were really seeding trees into all the medians on Parkway. Something like that, but with pollinator plants. So it'll be just little native plants that kind of like this, that all of the bees and the butterflies, the moths, beetles, everything's really enjoy having. Yeah, right. Almost everything's a pollinator. Birds are pollinators. I mean, especially think about hummingbirds and those little flowers that we saw at the beginning, the jewel weed with the little orange blooms. They can stick their little bills all the way back in there. So there, a lot of these pollinators have very specialized mouth parts, what a sexy word, that fit into specific flowers. So like that's why maybe these little ones are beloved by little bees, and then there's some with very deep tubes like a trumpet that only a bigger butterfly with a very long proboscis can get into, or hummingbird. So it's really, we want to plant a diversity of flowers and plants because there's such a diversity of pollinators. So
and we're going to start by planting some of that along the newly renovated golf course. So ours will be such a unique golf course anyway, and so we're really leaning into the fact that the golf course is adjacent to the state natural area and in fact winds through it. So we'll try to take some of our natural ecology and those principles into the golf course itself.
That was one of the reasons the architects, the King Collins, they kind of have a cult following, we've learned, but that was one of the reasons they were really excited about working in this park, is because it's adjacent to the state natural area and they could really lean in on the natural habitat and enhance that for the golfer's experience.
And there are a few places on these trails that we get to be right next to one of the most magnificent trees. So there are basically, you know, you're seeing that some of these trees are really, really big, and then some are a little bit smaller. So our largest trees are all about just under 200 years, 180, 185 is what they calculate. And this is an oak tree. And so our two suites of the largest trees are oak trees and tulip poplar trees. Tulip poplars are one species, that's it. The oak trees, we have a large suite of them, about 13 I think species here in the park, which is pretty amazing to have 13 species of oaks. And they cover bottomland trees, so this guy has these amazing buttresses, and that's to handle potential flooding. And then other oak trees might have a flatter trunk because they're a little bit more upland species. The gradient is only about 10 feet, but it's enough for plants to differentiate and to grow. And it's also, it kind of shows us that in all likelihood, this forest experienced a lot of disturbance. You know, it would have experienced flooding. You know, we have Lick Creek over here that we channelized, you know, back in the 30s. And so we've changed a lot of these regimes that may, you know, we're looking at if could that possibly have impact. We, of course, also, we repress fires now. So it's interesting to think that in years past, before the colonization, I should say, you know, we had episodic periods where things would come through and clear out some of this understory. This is a very, very dense understory. Possibly a little too dense. You know, it's pretty intensely dense. So
now, what is this? It looks like.
That's such a good question.
What are those?
This is one of our favorite initial wildflowers to come up. It's the mayapple. They're really wonderful. You can actually see the. I'm going to go off trail. Y'all don't do it, but there's the apple of the mayapple, and it had a beautiful little white flower. It takes several years for these to mature, and so you're going to see that the ones that have split, that's one that's mature enough to actually have a flower and a fruit. And then we will have some single stalks around that haven't quite gotten that old yet, and so they wouldn't have fruit yet. There's an example of that. So these are senescing, you know, they're going to disappear soon. That's part of the ephemerality of wildflowers. So it came up in the spring. It's slowly but surely going to be gone by July, let's say. We won't really see it anymore, and then we'll see it again next spring. know, of course I can't turn my my bird ears off, and I've just been kind of listening to see. We're starting a little bit later, so if anybody is interested in the birds, it's better to start it's a little bit earlier in the day, so they've already had their breakfast. You know, that's usually when they're chattering. And there's something called the dawn chorus. So if we were here right at sunrise, everybody would be announcing their territories. We'd have cardinals, we'd have the Acadian Fly Catcher we keep hearing, probably a few Carolina chickadees, we'd have some Carolina wrens. Everybody would be sort of saying, good morning, I'm announcing this is my turf. I have my family's nesting over here, I appreciate you, but don't come too close. That's kind of what bird calls and songs are all about. So, especially this time of year.
The original social distancing.
Totally. Absolutely. Yeah. Works like a charm. And that's a good point, because all different birds have different size territories. And so we were talking about the size of the forest. So, for instance, there's this incredible woodpecker called the Pileated Woodpecker. I don't know if anybody's ever heard of that. That's big! It's like the ivory-billed without the ivory bill, okay? Totally native. They're common, relatively. So this forest accommodates about one pair of Pileated woodpeckers, okay? It's 126 acres. That's a big bird, We're lucky to hear one. If we hear it, it echoes all the way across the forest. We could hear it anywhere in the forest right now if it whinnied. I'm listening. And then same thing with a barred owl. So we have a barred owl family here in the park that breeds every year. And we really probably support one barred owl family, okay? Some years there are so many Carolina wrens singing, it's just, you can't even hear anything else. It's like wren, 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 wren. They're all supporting their little territory. This is all I need. They can feed themselves, It's kind of amazing to think about that, how nature perfectly creates its niche, And this forest has so many plants and animals that there's so many niches. It's neat to think about. So I'm not hearing anything remarkable, so we can just.
You want to have an iNaturalist moment in case you just found a lost?
Oh, absolutely. We love to talk about, basically talk about apps that help people learn. Okay, and it used to be where is it? So we're gonna take a moment. Girl, you gotta be kidding. So good. Good eye. All right, so let me go ahead and get a picture before it goes away. So I don't know what this thing is. They just noticed this amazing moth that's on. Yep. So it is impossible to think that you can learn everything in this forest. But now there are tools, if you are addicted to your phone like I am, that can help you immediately start to feel like an expert. Now, you're not going to be able to get a picture of a bird, unfortunately, but there's some great apps that the songs are on there that you can learn. But if you want to start learning plants and animals like this moth, iNaturalist. She's doing it right now. She's loading it in. You take a picture, you load it in. I could learn black snakebirds. I could learn any of these plants.
Like the letter I or EYE?
It's a good question. I like the letter I, naturalist. Yeah. Okay, I use it all the time. I have learned so much about plants. I didn't know plants. Trees, yes, some basics, yes, but now I feel like an expert. I can take you on that wildflower tour now, and a lot of it's from Melissa, my live iNaturalist friend here, and then the app as well.
We brought the ladies from the Memphis Garden Club out here who, they're experts, and a lot of them were able to identify more of the wildflowers or the plants than we were, but they had a ball downloading iNat and confirming, and it keeps us humble too, because we have experts on our team, but like Phil said, we don't know everything, and so it just makes it's kind of a fun way to confirm or challenge yourself, or keep, like Melissa has a amazing repository of all the things she's discovered, and it's kind of like Shazam for music, but for plants.
And the way it does that is that it's been around for about 10-15 years, and so it's using all of the photos that we are uploading, and it's doing machine learning, so it trains its model. They train it maybe once a year with all the new observations, and so then it knows within a certain degree of confidence what it's looking at, and can kind of spit that back out at you.
So when you use it, you're helping the broader community.
You're doing science.
Yeah, we call it community science.
little low spot that we see a lot of birds, but there's just not that much going on. But she just mentioned that like it's so pretty with the sun, and this is such a great example of where one tree fell, and so there's this whole new that creates a whole new light regime and a whole new opportunity for plants to come in. And again, it's blanketed in jewelweed, so this tiny little spot that's just so pretty to our eyes is like such an exciting moment for the forest itself to possibly grow up the next tree, you know, or blanket it with the jewelweed for the pollinators. So
our director of operations, Eric Bridges, he's getting his PhD in forestry. He's the one that's also part-time, and he works with a lot of students from CBU or from Rhodes, and these are plots that he's studying, gaps in the canopy, studying regeneration of all these large oaks and tulip poplars and what makes them, and like Phil said, why are they not regenerating?
That's a good point. We didn't really go into that. We've talked about the fact that we have the one really tall, really big cohort of trees right around that 200-year mark, a little bit under, and then we have some that are maybe in the 50 or 60 year old range, and we're missing a lot of age classes in this forest, and we're trying to figure out why. And I was touching on it a little bit about the fact that the disturbance regimes are so different. So this would be, in a way, a disturbance. You'd have a tree fall, and actually it also points to one of the requirements to call something an old forest. When a tree falls in the forest, a big tree falls, there's a big root ball, okay? And it gets lifted up out of the earth, and it creates this little pit. And then as the tree begins to erode and create the next generation of soil, it creates a mound, and that's called pit and mound topography. You know how scientists are. They have to come up with something big and fancy to say a tree fell. But that little spot is right where the next, it's a requirement for certain organisms. You know, it's gonna host all these different organisms and possibly be the nursery for the next large tree. So again, we are encouraged by points of light, you know, spaces of light like that. We have another good tree fall coming up. Here's just one more thing to point out. You know, there are certain things that make something an old growth forest, and one of them is standing snags. So people don't, you know, we've talked about woody debris on the ground, but even a standing snag, this is a granary for woodpeckers. This is a home for woodpeckers. Countless insects use this. So to most people in their yard, they would say, oh my gosh, get rid of it, it's terrible, it may fall on my house. This is like imperative for the forest ecology.
Yeah. And a snag is
standing dead tree. It's basically just a standing dead tree. Here's a good example. This is a tulip poplar leaf. This is really one of our signature trees. And again, it's only one species, whereas the oaks we have several, but we sort of just say oaks and tulip poplars because that makes it easier to sort of digest what's going on. But it's a unique leaf structure. It's missing the top here. It's kind of got a haircut. But otherwise it kind of looks like a maple. Yeah. But that's the tulip poplar. It's in the magnolia family. It's in the magnolia group of trees.
See on our shirts.
Yeah.
There you go. We have the tulip poplar logo.
Yeah, there you go.
State tree. State tree.
Yeah.
Gorgeous
State tree
flowers too.
Yes.
Oh, yeah.
It's like orange babies. Yeah, little yellow.
Can get just as much of a dose of it walking on this simple concrete loop. Okay, you can't get lost. It's an easy map. It's online, and you can really feel the forest almost as much. So
you notice the temperature change. You can almost feel it immediately when you enter in and when you exit, the drop or increase,
and the difference in noise level. So suddenly we're back in Memphis. We're back in an urban area. We've got busy East Parkway. If this were a Saturday or Sunday afternoon, we'd have a raucous party over here. This is a wildly popular picnic area. We're in the middle of our master plan right now, and we have had all kinds of folks come in to talk to us about how our park compares to other parks nationally. We have the City Parks Alliance, which is a national organization of urban park managers. They had their annual board meeting in Memphis a little over a year ago, and we were standing here talking about how the park is used. And often when nonprofit park managers like us embark on a master plan, one of the first things that they have to figure out is how to get people to come use the park, how to activate the park. They said we were just so fortunate. What we have already is a thriving, bustling, beloved park. So we're starting from like the third starting block already. So our task now is just to make sure that we refine the park, that we put it on a path to sustainability so that future generations can enjoy the forest adjacent to a thriving picnic area. And then we have a big opportunity in the southeast corner, and we're going to walk over there and look at that in just a second. But you can see the direction that these two gentlemen are running. There is a, so we walked through the forest, but this is just less than a 10-minute walk to go back to where we started. Maybe even a 5-minute walk, depending on how low you are. And so when we replaced these ugly vehicle barrier gates with works of public art, this became kind of a thoroughfare. This became Union Avenue for the park, where we felt, like I said, we had two different parks separated by an impenetrable wall of scary forest. Now we have really an asphalt paved trail that feels like just part of the park experience, and that was very intentional, is what we were going for, and it worked. The park felt segregated in 2012 when we started managing it, and now everybody's using every aspect of the park. So it's exciting to see that play out. Like, we have a theory, we're going to test it, it worked. So we're very proud of that. We're continuing to learn. So as we go through our master planning process, we're taking our knowledge, we're checking in with people who have, you know, benchmarking experience with other parks around the country, and we're putting all of that together. But every park is unique, and Overton Park is extra unique. So, so that you'll see that play out through our planning process. You'll see us tackle it a different way, engage with the public in a slightly different way, and what we end up with will reflect back the uniqueness of Overton Park. One of the things that we're committed to in our master planning process is focusing not so much on the space. The space was designed by George Kessler. It's an enduring design. It's still relevant. It still works well. So we're focusing less on, you know, building new things and completely changing the space, and focusing more on how we can deliver for the people that are using it. So we call this a people-driven plan, and that is really underpinning our entire design process. This is 13 acres of this. So broken asphalt, underground gasoline storage tanks, old metal shop buildings, parking, junk storage, and then nestled in there, you can't see it from here, so you can see this white concrete block building. Just attached to that, just a little bit to the east, is a Works Progress Administration era building. It's about a 10,000 square foot rectangular warehouse with two clerestory bump out windows at the top. And we think that that is something that people would be really excited about restoring. It takes some imagination to think of something different for a 10,000 square foot white rectangle, but I think we can do it. I mean, if anybody can figure out adaptive reuse of historic buildings, Memphis is going to figure it out. So there's a lot of exciting opportunity there. Oh, right, yeah. So then on the other side of this one that's facing us with the shop doors that roll up, on the other side, right under just on the other side of that one big tree that's over there, there are 6 greenhouse bays, and they're pretty old. Some of them are, you know, at least 50 or 60 years old, maybe older. So that's one question, is do we keep the greenhouses? What kind of shape are they in? Are they salvageable? They're in use right now, literally all 6 of them. The City of Memphis horticulturalist is using 3, the zoo is using 2, Memphis City Beautiful just renovated the 6th and is kind of using that as a community space. So they're in use, so they're at least operable. So one of the questions is, what would you do if you had 6 greenhouse bays in the middle of an urban area? What would you do with it if you wanted to make it a public space? So that's interesting. A lot of exciting ideas coming up through our master plan team. And they're coming, we're working with Self-Tucker architects to analyze those structures here to see what's salvageable and maybe help generate a little bit more concrete thinking. That's my joke, because it's a concrete building. Concrete thinking about what we can do with this space. But so imagine, what is moth really loves me? Imagine the fence coming down and the forest. So if we were to round the corner here, you'd be kind of back into the old forest. And so how do you transition between this thriving public park experience, shady, beautiful park experience, into this more industrial zone? Like, what do you do to soften those transitions? How do you soften the transition from the forest onto the site? This is crazy. So those are the kinds of design ideas that I really love, that we've been playing around with. So we know.
Can I explain why that happens?
Yes.
So butterflies need minerals that's what they eat. It's basically like our need to consume salt. So we humans eat a lot of salt, so we sweat out salt. So there are lots of butterflies who will just hang out on your arm or on your face. It was on my shoe a minute ago, so let's hope that my shoe wasn't full of peanuts. But apparently Tina's face is super salty today.
Of course. I am my grandmother's granddaughter, and we just have salty genes. We have a unique golf course. Oh, what is that? What are we listening to, Fields?
Y'all, I don't know. We're gonna figure it out. We've got a titmouse. And we've got, is that the bunting? It's probably the bunting. Yeah, it is. There it is. Indigo bunting. It's an indigo bunting doing a short song. They usually do a much longer song. So you're doing a short song. That is an all blue bird. It's solid blue, the size of a sparrow. And I was just mentioning that, how they like more open, sunny areas. And so this is actually a perfect habitat for them.
Indigo buntings are gorgeous. As someone who knows very little, it's one of the first birds that I was exposed to. I was up in Meeman in Shelby Forest and saw a whole, they're very social, very flashy, and to hear Fields talk about the phenomenon of nature being blue and how rare that is. Well, go ahead.
No, that's it. That's just it. I mean, now that she's mentioned it, you know, this bird has blue feathers. There's no such thing as a blue pigment. Okay, that's all light refraction, and that's why in certain lights, an indigo bunting actually looks black. It's amazing. So, and just start thinking about, like, how often do you actually see blue in nature? Well, you got the sky, about that, and blueberries, you know? So they're a very rare, completely blue bird. Amazing that we just saw that.
And we saw it on the edge of a golf course, which is not something you think about as habitat friendly at all. So I want to talk a little bit about how this golf course is different than what we might see. And first off, it's designed by King Collins Golf Design. They are kind of renowned now. They have a huge following. They're known for their first course in Sweetens Cove, is named Sweetens Cove in East Tennessee. But they're working on multiple projects right now. They're getting pulled to design all over the country. We are their first municipal golf course, so they were really excited to work with us. And obviously, having a golf course in an urban, a 9-hole historic golf course, the oldest continuously operating municipal course in the country, in the middle of an urban area that winds through a natural area, an old growth forest. It's just so unique. So what we loved about the King Collins approach is that it's similar to the George Kessler approach in the design of the park. It's to highlight and accentuate the natural beauty and not get in the way of it. So what you see, rather than a more formal manicured look, we're going to have a much more natural look. So that obstacle right there that looks like leftover construction debris to me right now will eventually fill in with the soft wavy fescue grass, and it'll look like pit and mound topography that Fields was referencing. The edges of the golf course will be softer, so rather than having very hard lines, it'll just kind of transition into the forest. What we're looking at right now with all this brush along this, there's actually a little drainage ditch right there. We're going to take out that brush, and that's where we're going to later this year start to seed that in with some of Melissa's pollinator trail idea and some habitat friendly plantings, not something you would typically see in a golf course. And so we're gonna turn this way and look at how the golf course, this is the 3rd and 4th holes, fairways, and they're really hugged by the state natural area. That wall of greenery that you see is all state natural area. That's where we just were, inside the forest. So just think about that juxtaposition of where we were in the old forest and now where we are looking at a golf course of all things. This is prime habitat. This wall that faces east over to our left in the mornings, especially during songbird migration season, is just alive with birds. They love that edge. Down lower, where the golf course meets the forest, in that kind of corner at the bottom, the transition will be softened with more native plantings. So we had a lot of invasives over there, and so we cleared some of those out. But rather than having a kind of a wall of forest meets golf course, we're going to have more of a natural soft transition, something that you wouldn't expect to see again. The birders, the dog walkers, the runners, cross-country runners, everybody's using this golf course, not just golfers. And so our charge to the design team was to give us something that actually complements the full park experience and doesn't separate golf from park, but instead, you know, marries them together. if we were to cross through the sprinklers into that far corner back there, there's a little bench. It's like my favorite little hiding spot. And then there's a paved trail that connects the second hole to the third tee box. So after you finish hitting number 2 on the golf course, you get in your cart or you get your clubs and walk through the forest, through a trail to get to number 3. It's just magical. It really is. It's all wild and overgrown, just like what we walked through. So again, an experience that you're not going to get in any other golf course.